I never thought the happiest day of my life could turn into the darkest within a matter of seconds. When I walked into that hospital room, I wasn't just a man. I was a father. At least, I thought I was. The sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with the faint sweetness of baby powder hung in the air, and for a fleeting moment, it felt perfect. My wife lay in the bed, her hair messy but her smile painted carefully on like a mask, holding the small bundle I had been waiting months to meet. Our child, our future. A nurse, middle-aged with kind eyes but a serious expression, handed me the paperwork. "Congratulations, Dad," she said softly, placing the clipboard into my hands. "You just need to sign here to confirm everything." My hands trembled as I took the pen. This was it. The moment I had imagined 1,000 times. My name would be on that document, next to hers, forever tied to this little life we had created together. I glanced down at the form, my eyes scanning over the medical jargon and the official boxes, until something unusual caught my attention. At the bottom, in bold print, were 3 words that froze me in place. Biological father, excluded. For a second, I thought it was some kind of clerical error. Maybe a typo. My chest tightened, heat flooding up my neck. I looked up at the nurse, confusion and panic wrestling inside me. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the beeping machines and distant cries of newborns in the ward. "Before you sign, you should get a DNA test." The pen slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the tile floor. The sound echoed in my ears louder than it should have, like a gunshot. The world around me slowed. I could hear the shuffle of doctors outside the room, the squeak of shoes against polished floors, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, but it all sounded far away. I turned to look at the tiny baby in my wife's arms. The baby's little hands were clenched into fists, his face scrunched in that innocent way only a newborn could look. He was perfect. Too perfect. My heart begged me to ignore what I had just read, to sign the form, to live the lie if that's what it meant. But my mind, my gut, screamed that something was horribly, irreversibly wrong. I stared at my wife, my throat tightening. "What does this mean?" My voice cracked, the words trembling as they left my mouth. She didn't flinch, didn't panic. She simply adjusted the blanket around the baby and smiled, almost lazily. The kind of smile that made me feel like she had been waiting for this moment. Like she had already prepared an answer, but wasn't in any rush to give it. The nurse looked between us, shifting uncomfortably. "Sir, it's standard that if there's any doubt, you have the right to request further testing before confirming legal paternity." Her words were professional, but her eyes told another story. Pity, sympathy. She knew what I had just walked into. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to rip that smug smile off my wife's face. But I couldn't. Not in that moment. All I could do was sit there, frozen, the clipboard still resting on my lap like a ticking bomb. The reality of those 3 words, biological father, excluded, pressed down on me with crushing weight. This wasn't supposed to happen. Fathers are supposed to cry tears of joy in the delivery room, not tears of betrayal. Fathers are supposed to sign paperwork with pride, not suspicion. And yet, there I was, staring at a truth that threatened to shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my wife, and the life we were supposed to build together. And then came her smirk. That was when I realized the nightmare had only just begun. I couldn't take my eyes off those words. Biological father, excluded. They sat there on the page like a knife driven straight into my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the clipboard tighter just to keep it from sliding off my lap. I kept reading them over and over, hoping that somehow the letters would rearrange themselves, that the nightmare was just some twisted trick of exhaustion or stress. But no matter how many times I blinked, the truth stayed the same. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. My heart was hammering so loudly I could barely hear myself think. I looked at the nurse, desperate for some kind of explanation, but she only gave me that same look of pity. That quiet confirmation that this wasn't a mistake, that my world was collapsing, and everyone could see it except the woman sitting across from me. I turned toward my wife, my throat dry, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this? What the hell does this mean?" Her eyes flicked down to the paper, then back to me. And then, unbelievably, she smirked. Not guilt, not fear, a smirk, like I was the fool for asking, like she'd already won some battle I hadn't even known I was fighting. "So what?" she said casually, adjusting the baby in her arms. You would have believed the baby was yours anyway. You would have signed the papers, gone home, and lived your little happy life without asking questions. Why make it harder than it has to be? Her words cut deeper than anything I had ever heard. There was no remorse, no apology, not even the decency to lie to me gently. Just arrogance, dripping from her tone, as if my pain was an inconvenience to her. I felt something in me crack. All the late nights, she claimed she was working. All the phone calls she took in the other room. The sudden mood swings, the unexplained absences. It all came rushing back like a flood. Pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to put together. I stared at the baby again. His tiny face, the way his lips curled slightly as he slept. He didn't ask for this. He didn't deserve to be born into lies and betrayal. But the truth was right in front of me now, and I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unknow it. My wife leaned back against the pillows, her smirk widening. You're not going to do anything, she said matter-of-factly. You're going to sign those papers, bring us home, and pretend this conversation never happened. Because that's what men like you do. You stay. You provide. You swallow your pride and call it love. Her arrogance was suffocating. My chest burned, my vision blurred at the edges, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just sat there, staring at the floor, gripping that clipboard like it was the last anchor keeping me from drifting into madness. Every instinct inside me screamed to shout, to accuse, to throw the papers back in her face and walk out that door forever. But something stronger took hold of me in that moment. A cold, calculated calm. If I exploded now, if I gave her the satisfaction of seeing me break, she'd win. And she already thought she had me cornered. I took a slow, shaky breath and set the clipboard down on the table. My hand steadied. My heartbeat slowed. She thought this was the end of me, but what she didn't realize was that it was only the beginning. Because as much as it felt like my world had just collapsed, somewhere deep down, a fire had been lit. And that fire was going to burn through every lie she thought she had buried. I don't think I'll ever forget the look on her face in that moment. Most people, when they're caught, when the truth explodes out into the open like a grenade, they panic. They stutter, they cry, they beg. But not her. No, my wife leaned back on that hospital bed like a queen holding court, smirking down at me as if I were some servant who'd just overstepped my place. So what? She repeated, her tone dripping with mockery. What difference does it make? You would have raised him as your own anyway. You love playing the good guy, don't you? Providing, protecting, showing off what a stand-up man you are. This doesn't change anything. You'd still be his dad. Her words felt like acid, burning through whatever scraps of trust one had left. My fists clenched at my sides, and for a split second, I wanted to scream, to shatter that smug expression. But I held myself back. That's what she wanted. To see me unravel, to watch me crumble so she could feel untouchable. Instead, I asked the question that had been choking me since I read the paperwork. My voice came out low, calm, steadier than I expected. Whose is he? For the first time, her smirk faltered. It was brief, barely a flicker, but I saw it. Her lips pressed together, her eyes darted to the side, and then she forced the smirk back into place. Does it matter? She said. You just obsess over the details. You don't need to know. My stomach twisted. Not only had she cheated, not only had she lied, but now she thought she had the right to keep the truth from me, to decide what I needed to know. The nurse quietly excused herself from the room, sensing the storm building between us. The door clicked shut, and suddenly it was just the three of us, me, her, and the baby. That child, innocent and oblivious, nestled against the chest of a woman who had weaponized motherhood into a tool of control. You planned this, I said finally. The words weren't a question, they were a realization. You were going to let me sign those papers, claim a child that isn't mine, and live off my ignorance. She didn't even deny it. Instead, she shrugged, her smirk widening again. It would have been easier that way. For both of us. You get to play dad. I get to live without your constant questions. Everyone wins. I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. The arrogance in her tone was suffocating. There was no guilt, no remorse, just calculation. She had already decided how this was supposed to go, and in her mind, I was too weak to resist. You really think I'm just going to let this slide? I asked, my voice sharper now. Her laugh was cold, hollow. Of course you are. Because men like you never leave. You cling to your pride, But in the end, you always come back. You'll raise this child, because what's the alternative? Admit to everyone that your wife outsmarted you? That you weren't enough for her? Do you think anyone would believe you, even if you tried? Her words stabbed deeper than I wanted to admit. She was right about one thing. People rarely believe the man in these situations. She knew her advantage wasn't just the lies she told. It was the story she could spin. And she was confident she'd win that battle, too. But as she sat there, basking in her arrogance, she didn't realize something had shifted inside me. I wasn't broken. I wasn't beaten. I wasn't the man who was going to slink away quietly and swallow this betrayal. I leaned forward, my voice low, steady, and colder than she'd ever heard it. Enjoy your little victory lap. Because this, I tapped the paperwork still sitting on the table. This is the last time you'll ever smirk at me. For the first time since this nightmare began, her confidence flickered. Just for a second. And in that second, I knew. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Walking out of that hospital room felt like dragging chains behind me. Every step was heavy, my chest tight, my thoughts a storm of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. I should have been carrying balloons, taking pictures, texting family, grinning like an idiot about being a new dad. Instead, I walked through those sterile hallways like a man who had just buried something precious. And in a way, I had. My trust, my marriage, my entire sense of stability. But here's the thing. As broken as I felt in that moment, another part of me, something I hadn't felt in years, was waking up. A cold resolve. She thought she had me cornered. She thought I'd just sign, swallow the humiliation, and keep my mouth shut. In her mind, I'd keep paying the bills, keep playing the husband, keep raising a child that wasn't mine, all while she laughed behind my back. That smug smirk in the hospital bed told me everything I needed to know. She believed she was untouchable. And maybe before that day, she would have been right. Maybe the old me, the man who avoided conflict, who always put family first no matter what, would have folded. But something snapped inside me when I saw those words on the paperwork. Biological father, excluded. That wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. That was proof. Cold, undeniable proof that my life had been turned into a lie. I couldn't undo what had happened. I couldn't change the fact that my wife had chosen to betray me in the most brutal way possible. But I could decide how the story ended. And I wasn't about to let her write the last chapter. That night, I sat alone in the quiet of our house, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed with messages, family asking for updates, friends expecting joyful news. I ignored them all. I couldn't fake the happiness anymore. Instead, I pulled the paperwork out of my bag and set it on the kitchen table. I studied every line, every word, until my vision blurred. This was no longer just a piece of paper. It was my weapon. I thought about her words, how she mocked me. You're not going to do anything. And that was when I made my decision. If I stayed silent, if I walked away without a fight, I'd prove her right. I'd be exactly the weak man she believed I was. But if I fought, if I stood my ground, if I dragged every one of her lies into the light, then for once, she would feel what it was like to lose control. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the contact of a lawyer I knew from years back, a guy who had helped a buddy of mine through a messy divorce. It was late, but I didn't care. I left a message on his voicemail. I need to talk. It's urgent. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window. I barely recognized the man looking back. My face was hard, my jaw clenched, my eyes colder than they'd ever been. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I realized then that this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about power. She had taken it from me for too long, laughing behind her mask, convinced she was in control. But control is only real until the truth shows up. And I had the truth. The next time she smirked at me, it wouldn't be in a hospital bed, holding her lies in her arms. It would be in front of a judge, in front of witnesses, where her arrogance would finally crack. That was the moment I stopped being the victim. That was the moment I became the storm. The morning after my decision, everything felt sharper. The coffee tasted stronger, the air colder, even the ticking of the kitchen clock seemed louder. I wasn't drifting anymore. I had a direction. And that direction was simple. Prepare. The first call I made was to the lawyer. His name was Harris, an older man with a reputation for being relentless in family court. When he picked up, his voice was groggy. Clearly I had woken him up, but after I told him the situation, he was wide awake. DNA paperwork in hand? He asked. Yes. Good. Keep it safe. Make copies, but never give away the original. This is your sword and shield. His words steadied me. For the first time since the hospital, I felt like I wasn't alone. I scanned and backed up the documents that night, tucking the original into a safe I hadn't opened in years. When the paperwork for the court filing went through, I felt an odd sense of calm. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I was building. Each piece of evidence, each note Harris advised me to take, each record, it all stacked up like bricks in a wall that she would never climb over. A week later, she got the notice. I'll never forget the way she laughed when she read it. Standing in the living room, her phone in one hand, the official letter in the other, she looked at me like I was a child trying to play adult games. You filed for court? She scoffed, tossing the letter onto the coffee table. You're actually going to drag this circus into the open? Do you have any idea how pathetic you'll look? I didn't flinch. No, but I know how pathetic you'll look. Her eyes narrowed, but she forced a laugh, louder this time, like she was trying to convince herself she still had control. You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone's going to see you for what you are, a bitter, weak man who couldn't keep his wife happy. I'll bring everyone, my family, my friends, even people from work. We'll fill that courtroom wall to wall, and they'll all laugh at you when this blows up in your face. She thought intimidation was enough to scare me back into silence. But the more she talked, the less I feared her. In fact, her arrogance was fueling me, confirming that every step I was taking was the right one. That night, I sat in my office, Harris on speakerphone as we reviewed strategy. She's going to try to drown you in noise, he said. Crowds, character attacks, emotional outbursts. But none of that matters. What matters is evidence. And right now, you've got the only evidence that counts. I ran my thumb over the corner of the envelope. Biological father, excluded. She still thought this was a game. She thought she could laugh, gather her army, and make me look like a fool. What she didn't realize was that courtrooms don't run on laughter or arrogance. They run on facts. And facts were on my side. By the time I went to bed, her laughter still echoing faintly in my ears, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt anticipation. Because the show she was planning? The big spectacle where she expected me to crumble? She had no idea the script was already written, and she wasn't going to like the ending. The courthouse smelled like old wood and dust, that mix of history and judgment that clings to every courtroom. As I walked through those double doors, my footsteps echoed against the marble floor. I came alone. No family, no cheering section. Just me, a folder under my arm, and the weight of truth in my hands. She, on the other hand, had turned it into a parade. When I stepped into the courtroom, it was already packed wall to wall with her people. Friends, cousins, co-workers, even her parents sat proudly in the front row. All of them whispering, all of them turning their heads to glare at me like I was the villain in their story. And there she was, my wife, or rather, the woman who used to be my wife. She sat near the front with her lawyer, her hair perfectly styled, her smile wide, her posture screaming confidence. She looked like someone attending an awards ceremony, not a hearing that could change the rest of her life. The whispers in the crowd got louder as I walked to my seat. I could hear them, mocking me, judging me, repeating the lies she'd clearly fed them. Pathetic, bitter, can't even keep his wife happy. They weren't quiet about it. That was part of her plan. Surround me with noise, make me feel small, make me look like the fool she always said I was. I sat down slowly, keeping my face calm, my body language steady. Inside, my chest was burning, but I refused to let it show. This was exactly what she wanted, an audience, a stage, and a performance where she played the star while I stumbled in the background. Her lawyer, a smug man in a tailored suit, leaned over to whisper something to her. She laughed softly, loud enough that people around her joined in. They looked at me like they were waiting for me to crack, to snap under the pressure. But I didn't. The bailiff called for order. The room quieted, and the judge walked in, robes flowing, expression stern. He settled into his chair, looked over the docket, and then glanced toward us. Case number 2473, he said firmly. Paternity and support hearing. Parties present? Her lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client is here, and she is ready to show this court that the respondent is the legal father of this child and should accept his responsibilities. He said it like it was already a foregone conclusion, Like my role in this story was already written. Pay up, shut up, and keep carrying the weight. The gallery nodded along, whispering approval, their eyes digging into me like knives. Then the judge turned his eyes to me. And you, sir? I stood, my folder in hand, my voice steady. Yes, Your Honor. I am present, and I am here to show this court the truth. The tension in the room thickened instantly. I could feel the shift. Her supporters leaned forward, hungry to watch me flail. She leaned back in her chair, smirk on her lips, as if this was all entertainment. Very well, the judge said. We'll begin with the evidence. I handed the envelope to the clerk, my heart pounding, but my expression calm. This was it. Months of betrayal, weeks of preparation, hours of humiliation. It all came down to a single sheet of paper sealed inside that envelope. As the judge slid it open and pulled the document free, I glanced toward her. She was radiant with confidence, crossing her legs, whispering something to her lawyer. Her smile said it all. She believed this was my destruction, my public humiliation, the day she finally broke me for good. But what she didn't realize was that the silence about to fall would be her undoing, not mine. The judge unfolded the document slowly, his glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose as he read through the lines. The silence in that room was suffocating, like everyone was holding their breath. I could feel dozens of eyes boring into me, waiting for my collapse, waiting to see me humiliated. I kept my gaze locked on her. She was still smirking, whispering something to her lawyer, confident as ever. Her army of friends and relatives leaned forward in their seats, eager for the spectacle. She had promised them a show, and they were convinced this was the opening act. But then the judge's voice cut through the room like a blade. According to the DNA test, he said firmly, the alleged father is excluded. The word excluded echoed in the courtroom like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was deafening. And then I saw it. The smirk slipped from her face. Her lips parted, her eyes wide, the blood draining from her cheeks. It was as if someone had ripped the ground out from under her. Her friends shifted in their seats, whispering frantically. A few gasped audibly. Her parents looked at each other, pale and frozen. Even her lawyer's jaw tightened as he leaned toward her, clearly blindsided. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there calmly, my eyes locked on hers, letting the silence do the work. The judge cleared his throat and continued, his tone steady and matter-of-fact. This court finds that the respondent is not the biological father of the minor child. Accordingly, he is not responsible for any legal or financial obligations associated with paternity. The whispers grew louder. Her audience, the people she had invited to witness my destruction, were now turning their eyes on her. Some looked shocked, some disgusted. A few even shook their heads and looked away, unwilling to meet her gaze. The woman who thought she was untouchable was suddenly very, very small. She turned toward me, panic flooding her eyes. Her lips moved, but no words came out. For the first time, she was the one who looked cornered, trapped in a cage of her own making. I leaned back in my chair, calm, steady, in control. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about the child. This was about truth, and the truth had just gutted her in front of everyone she had ever tried to impress. Her lawyer tried to recover, stammering something about reconsideration and support for the child's well-being, but the judge shut him down with a raised hand. The evidence is clear, he said. The matter is settled. And just like that, it was over. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as I gathered my folder and stood. She reached out, her voice finally breaking through the noise, trembling and desperate. Wait, please. But I didn't wait. I didn't speak. I didn't even look back. I walked toward the exit, calm and deliberate, while behind me the walls of her world caved in. She had invited an audience to witness my humiliation. Instead, they had watched hers. And in that silence, as I stepped through the courtroom doors, I realized, for the first time since that hospital, I felt free. The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom closed behind me with a deep, echoing thud. It sounded final, like the punctuation mark at the end of a long, bitter sentence. For the first time in weeks, my lungs actually felt full, like I could breathe again. I didn't rush down the hallway. I didn't need to. Every step was deliberate, calm, steady. My folder was tucked under my arm, the DNA results still inside, but I no longer felt like I was carrying the weight of the world. I was carrying freedom. Behind me, muffled through the doors, I could still hear the stir of voices, her supporters unraveling, whispering, questioning, turning on her the way sharks turn on one another when there's blood in the water. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening. The same friends who had cheered her arrogance, the same co-workers who smirked at me, the same family members who glared at me like I was trash. They had just witnessed her lie collapse in front of a judge. No amount of spin could save her now. She had built her whole plan around humiliating me publicly. She wanted to make me beg, to force me into a role I didn't deserve. Instead, she had destroyed herself, and the audience she had assembled was now her jury. I stepped out into the sunlight. It was brighter than I expected, warm on my face. For weeks, I had felt like I was drowning in shadows, but now it felt like morning. People passed by on the courthouse steps, busy with their own lives, not knowing or caring about the war I had just walked out of. And that was the beauty of it. My life was mine again. I paused at the top of the stairs and looked out at the city. I thought about everything she had said, how men like me never leave, how I'd stay, provide, pretend, how I'd swallow my pride because that's what she expected. But she was wrong. I hadn't just left. I had walked away with my dignity intact, while she was left drowning in the wreckage of her own arrogance. I didn't hate her, not anymore. Hate would have meant she still had power over me. What I felt instead was colder, cleaner. Indifference. She wasn't my problem anymore. Not her lies, not her games, not her child that wasn't mine. The judge's words had cut those chains. When I reached the bottom of the steps, my phone buzzed. Messages, missed calls, friends and family who had been waiting to hear about the happy news. I looked at the screen for a long moment, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. Not yet. This wasn't a story I was going to rush to tell. Some truths are heavier than others, and people could wait. For now, I just wanted silence. I got into my truck, the seat worn and familiar, and sat there for a minute with my hands on the steering wheel. I thought about the baby, innocent and blameless. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't chosen this. And in some strange way, I pitied him. But he wasn't mine, not by blood, not by law, not by choice. That chapter was closed. I turned the key, the engine rumbling to life. As I pulled away from the courthouse, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. She would be left standing in that crowded courtroom, surrounded by the very people she had called as her audience, all of them whispering, judging, seeing her for what she really was. She had wanted to ruin me in front of everyone. But in the end, she had ruined herself. And me? I was done playing her games. I was free.